Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you happen to stance in this truth bomb riff. I think we're somewhere in like the 730 range, who knows? Anyway, we're recording on Martin Luther King Day, Monday, January 19th, 2026, at early, 8:30 Pacific, because I wanted to first just address your truth bomb from last night, Roseanne, the first thing this morning, because we spoke a little bit last night, but I rewatched it this morning and I felt the passion. I felt the urgency. I felt pretty good framing of where we are. But what I didn't feel was the connection to reality. I felt a lot of platitudes. Okay. And I want to discuss this with you because I want to try to get to the audience where you're coming from and what I'm delivering and where they merge in context to Martin Luther King's Day, if we want to put that as sort of a the tenor of the subject, of the tone of today, because obviously the civil rights movement didn't happen overnight, and to this day, obviously, it hasn't been 100% success. In fact, we're going backwards, right? So, I guess the first question I want to ask, just in that context, how would you compare the civil rights movement to Project 2025?
I think for me, uh, the civil rights movement is more a meeting of the feeling, the the heart, the what it's empathy, okay? It's looking at decades of of suffering and terrible things that have been done to people. And even if you don't go all the way back in history, I go, say you just go back to what I first remember, and that is people getting uh, attacked by dogs and fire hoses being turned on them. How can anybody allow that to happen? You've got to be some miserable, no good, heartless, soulless moron to allow that to happen. And as I'm saying that, I'm thinking of George Wallace going, segregation today, segregation tomorrow, And what happened to George Wallace? Oh, karma, karma. All right. So yeah, but
But let
but
me
the,
let me let me reintroduce us just in case somebody's watching us for the first time. My name is Patrick Lovell. I'm the producer with the $71 trillion truth, and you're going to glean into what that means as this dialogue continues. My colleague is Roseanne Rabiola Mile. She's an incredible activist, a beautiful human being, somebody who comes from a very storied background of being in government, also working at law firms, working at banks. I mean, she's got an incredible resume, as well as, really donating her time and her efforts and her energy to people that have fallen through the cracks for years and years and years. And she's a very, very intelligent woman, specializing in Italian history earlier in her career and then later economics, among other things. Okay, so she's got a wide array of interests and experiences and that sort of thing. But really, what connected us is her understanding intuitively in her DNA of corruption, because she comes from
corruption.
Chicago, and in Chicago, the Daily Machine, which was the Democratic Party, ran things a certain way. And she learned early how the system of power works. Okay. So she's always been intuitively connected to it. And maybe I'd say, and I think this is probably a fair assessment, very suspicious of power always, and maybe anti-power, resistant of power, and somebody who, from your experience in the late 60s, early 70s, always as an activist, somebody that would, meet tyranny head on and battle it for humanity or human rights. Maybe that's kind of the baseline, but that's just the introduction contextually. So I want to get back to the theme of the moment, your impetus last night, where we are and what's going on, and then ultimately what I'm going to try to foster to the audience, which is why they have to shut everything off. Literally, the lies are in every way. in every direction, even from people that we consider the good guys. And there's a reason for that. Okay. And we'll get into that. And we're not going to go very long, I hope. I'm going to try to keep it as brief as possible. But the corollary to what you just said, there was this emotive reaction finally in the 60s that this followed the Civil War. This followed, obviously, the American Revolution. This, followed the inhumanity of slavery, and what was happening on a global sort of paradigm. I mean, this is 300 years in the making, with probably millions of people who had suffered and died in this whole process prior to the civil rights movement, right? And we had had a war against fascism where nearly 1 million American troops died. There were 70 million people worldwide that died. The entire world was literally shattered into 1 million pieces. And we started picking up the pieces of the puzzle post World War II. And there was this, I would say, there was this more than not, there was this unanimous sort of interest,
Unanimity.
unanimity in the idea of liberty and justice and fairness. Literally, the sacrifice and the carnage of the consequence of everything from post World War I into the Great Depression into World War II was so enormous. But really, if you look at it, it was a perpetuation of the enormity of all that I just mentioned that preceded it, right? And so you talked about, what was happening at the lunch counters and with the dogs and the police and the obviously what goes with that is the Jim Crow state. And what we're looking at,
My own neighborhood. In my own
well, in
neighborhood, I saw.
Chicago, I can only imagine there was a tremendous racism in Chicago as well, right? So we end up today, in the aftermath of Nicole Renee Good, or is it Renee Nicole Good? I apologize if I
Renee.
Renee Nicole Good, obviously shot in the face 3 times. Everything that has led to with the demonstrations and counter protests, and really just the outrage and the explosiveness of the whole thing, Minneapolis, which is just, of course, a continuation of everything that's happened since ICE has taken to the streets and the National Guard in California and Los Angeles, particularly Chicago, Washington, D.C., Minneapolis. And really, depending on who you listen to in your Hive network feeds, and I try to pay attention to a lot of different voices to see where they're calculating where we are, what we're doing, and what's next. And you will hear, I would think, unanimity on the fact that we're no longer thinking about fascism coming. We know it's here. We know it's here completely. We know it's going to get worse. People are accurately questioning whether or not there's going to be a midterm, what the results of the midterm mean, where we are, and so forth. So the first question I asked you, and I'll ask you again because I didn't give you a chance to finish the second part of it. Compare, please, and contrast. And you already said the civil rights movement, but now the difference between that and Project 2025.
Project 2025 has been, it's a detailed items of what's been in the making for decades. And it's been always financed. They have always had the resources and the, let's say, tenacity or the perseverance to keep on going to get to where they want to be, to get to the point where the Supreme Court is bought off. And I cannot help but look at what it is that people want. They want a solution. The solution is some type of plan. And because I always go right to the bottom line, we have a plan. everybody knows and everybody says, follow the money. Project 2025 has always had the money, which gives people the power. The two of us, all the work that you've done, all the work that I've done has been has been done with tenacity and honesty and less resources or no resources. You were fortunate to have the millions that you had to be able to go through the journey to make the con, which laid out for me and for anybody who watches it that has some common sense, how the powerful, how those in government do what they do, how they manage to just keep just keep going with corrupt actions, with ignoring the law, and with no accountability, and with nobody stopping them.
Okay, great. This is perfect. Great. Really well said. And your instincts are really good. And then we start to spin off in the weeds. That's why I wanted to have this conversation so we can kind of keep it compartmentalized. Okay. So first and foremost, the difference between the civil rights movement and the Project 2025 is a history, too much pressure to bear, an overwhelming sense of response given the lay of the land of what I presented, but the added context, which was ironic, all things considered, of the Vietnam War and conscription. And once you had young men, particularly white men, being forced into military duty, they pressed back, especially college educated people, and they said, hell no, we won't go. So that supercharged all of the other elements. And of course, there was a cultural revolution and this, that, and the other, and people were exploring things. And yeah, we had an educated middle class, and we actually had a middle class. Those are two very important things because when you're educated, when you know how things work, you are a challenge to tyranny. And ultimately, what that began to spawn were the likes of Ralph Nader. Now, concurrently to the Vietnam War and the culture wars and the protests and the civil rights movement, there was also a legal revolution, if you were, against out of control corporate corruption, or I should say, out of control corporate malfeasance, right? That was held to account to a degree. And that gave us, more of a balanced Supreme Court. And there were things in Congress, and the people were more active, in fact, monumentally more active. And so those that ran for the office of the, of Congress, the Senate, whatever would foster in the courts, they all had this come from where the people were watching, I would say, much more so than now. And of course, they were less, shall we say, exposed to so many lies and confusing lies and algorithms and all of these other architecture of the moment because there was only, a handful of media. I mean, yeah, there was a lot of newspapers, but there was just things where people found each other, quite frankly, in a sort of burgeoning confluence of people aligned, right? And so they were activated and they became a people's pressure resistance expression of what the soul of the country had wanted to obtain. And again, nothing happens in a vacuum. This was all part of the long march of slavery, of Jim Crow, of Confederacy, into the war against fascism, an unbelievable sacrifice to end up giving the world that I grew up in, let's say starting in the 70s, this sort of a little bit more dynamic, a little bit more fair, at least on paper. At least it appeared that way. But the forces at work behind the scenes was Project 2025 from the beginning, starting with the PAL memo, starting with the consortium of the corporations that circle the wagons to try to think through the system to challenge what was at that time of the civil rights movement and Martin Luther King, the dynamics that made that so successful. Really, the popularity of the United States. We hear a lot of people talking right now about the polls. I think polls are absolutely ridiculous at the moment, but at the same time, there is a utility for polls. I think a vast majority of people are sickened by what's going on. I think a vast majority of people didn't sign up for this. I think a vast majority of people, and again, I have to insert this. Let's just say Donald Trump did win the popular vote. I think they did cheat in a lot of ways as well. Now, they may have won the popular vote. I'm not sure, but I know there was anomalies that took place during the election. I know that there was strange behavior that just seems so obvious in retrospect between Elon Musk and whatever forces he had in the booths, and who knows what that means. There's never been a full audit on the whole thing. And so Donald Trump wins the second, presidency after, of course, not being held to account in four different court cases, major court cases. Fonnie Willis in Georgia, obviously Alvin Bragg, he did go down for 34 felony convictions in the East or Southern District of Manhattan. Then there was, of course, all things Jack Smith that got roped up because of Judge Eileen Cannon down in Palm Beach. And then I think I'm missing. Oh yeah, no, they got at least the convictions and all things Letitia James. Am I missing any that you can think of at the moment?
Well, he got the woman who was a journalist. He was convicted in her trial
Oh,
that
you're
he
talking
had
about, yeah,
to pay.
Janine. Wait, something Carroll. Yeah, but the rape.
Yeah, E. Carroll.
Yeah,
He's got
he,
to pay
right,
the money.
right, okay. But again, he's gotten out of everything so far, and he's going to continue to get out of everything because he has absolute power. Because that's the whole point of the excuse me, the
Presidential immunity.
well, presidential immunity and the executive presidency. That's the whole point of Project 25. And again, what people need to understand, and what I'm trying to get you to understand, is that right now we're at a stage where it's too late. Okay, we've been warning about this, as have others, for a very long time. I mean, you can go back in our 740 truth bombs, and you'll probably hear pretty much the same message
Stuff.
every single day. The warning that corruption births and fuels fascism. That if we don't actually, circle the wagons and pinpoint what exactly that Don the Con Rico Pedo Pig has done to hold him accountable, then we're toast. But John is not the mastermind, nor has he ever architected any of this stuff. He's the benefactor of a system that's wanted this since, well, they've been here the whole time, but they've been extremely organized since the 70s. And so, like I like to say a lot of the times, is that, you can go out on the streets and you can throw rocks and you can hide behind masks and everything else. And yeah, that might be good for social media, and you might get a lot of people fired up for all the right reasons. But you're not going to beat the Supreme Court. You're not going to beat the military of the United States. You're not going to beat a budget where you have ICE agents who obviously are January 6thers and a bunch of kids that grew up playing Call of Duty in this insanity where we all have seen the satire against it and people making fun of it. But at the same time, it's no laughing matter. They've got the guns, they've got the courts, they've got the power. So we have got to have a concerted effort of smart people. Okay. My colleague Roseanne always suggests that we need 3.5%. Okay. Yeah, we do. But we really need smart, motivated people who are horrified by where we are. Probably a lot of people in my age group, X generation, we know what we came up with, we know who we are, but you don't understand what you gave up, what we gave up collectively in the aftermath of the great financial crisis that enabled this whole thing. So Roseanne is completely right. She identifies all the time that we've provided tens of trillions of dollars illegally to the financial system. This is what she doesn't say specifically a lot of the times that I have to fill in the blanks here. We gave it to the collective financial system. The collective financial system encompasses too big to fail banks, hedge funds, private equity, wealth management, asset management, and a garden variety of all of the different ins and outs of what take place in, the monetary pipeline. Okay. In my work, The Con, I had the great opportunity to realize, because I am a producer, I'm a businessman, I'm an entrepreneur, I know how to put deals together. I thought I knew the marketplace. What I underestimated, and I think you'll agree with me, Roseanne, is that I thought that there was a market for truth. Would you say that there's a market for truth?
It's this big.
And by the way, for all of those who are kind of like, oh yeah, rolling your eyes about truth, Roseanne, is truth, I don't know, is it,
Truth is objective, okay? I don't want anybody to tell me that truth is subjective. Now, I will go further. 1 plus 1 equals 2. Is that truth? I would say it is. Is that objective? Yes, it is. There are many things, and there's so much, not just many. There are so many things that have been documented in all the work that we present in the truth bombs. For instance, and I think this will make sense even sort of without a lot of context. If you are in charge of the Federal Reserve System and someone who works for the Federal Reserve System brings to you, look at what's happening. We've got evidence here. We have to stop what's going on. We have to stop the criminality. And you, as head of the Federal Reserve, say, no, no way, no damn way. It ain't going to happen. Go away. Go away. So one person, Alan Greenspan, and he's just one example. One person has the power to stop corruption and criminal activity, and he chose not to. Whistleblowers, a whole other uh, group of people, know what's going on in various departments of the government. And they are afraid. They are afraid because if they say something, they're going to get quashed. Their life is going to be ruined. And the only point I'm trying to make is that one person can be powerful for good or for evil. And I'm just out there talking to people, trying to see if you have a sense of good and evil. Let me show you the material that we have and say yes, accept the good. That's all I'm trying to
okay,
do.
so let me insert this, okay? So, yes, there are theoretical theoretical constructs that imbue truth. There are faith-based truth. There's philosophy. There's this, that, and the other. But then there's also forensic truth. There's a cause and effect. There's mens rea. There's actus reus. It's the entirety of what the law is predicated on that requires capable professionals that use and sort out the facts, but it moves at a glacial pace. Okay, see, this is what
Yep.
The fascists know. The fascists know that if they could take over the law with the revolving door because of what you identified, because we know that the fish rots from the head. If you can get a corrupt person at the apex of institutions, they can destroy the entire institution. It doesn't take, a lot of people debate, is it a few bad apples or is the whole, barrel bad? Well, in this case, the whole barrel became bad, not just yesterday, decades ago. Okay. And that's what we reveal in the con. What we reveal in the con is how tens of millions of liars' loans, which are felonies, different degrees of felonies, depending on if you could catch up and get all of the evidence together, were built into a pipeline, a global racketeering pipeline of criminality that was beyond third degree felonies that encompassed lying on mortgage loans, on appraisal codes, on all things, manner, shape, or form of all of the backstops that go into the ratings, the credit rating agencies, on down the line because of financial derivative products, particularly what we call financial innovation. There was this massive, and this is what our system has become, is its financialization, which is all about capital flow and who gets paid how. And ultimately, you have perverse incentives where everybody makes a number by any means necessary. And when they blow up the fucking world, if you had capitalism, that whole thing is supposed to fail completely. Or if you had the law, the people who set everybody up by using criminal activity would go to jail and they would have all of their ill-gotten gains returned and they would go to prison. That's how a system of integrity works. That's not what happened. So
Right.
people right now are finally having a sort of measure of, as it regards to the Epstein files. Oh my God, how is it possible that a tiny group of elite people can be above the law and get away with literally raping children? Okay, I mean, this is so ridiculously noxious and toxic and disgusting and perverse and all of the other things, but we all recognize it to be true. But what was undergirding it all? Pressure, blackmail, money, all sorts of other elements that happen to tie into exactly what we're talking about. So there's a lot of people out there in the blogosphere, or let's say media influencers, or people that are getting bigger and bigger audience because they're feeding the Epstein algorithm. And the DNC is now interested in Epstein. We just saw last week Sheldon Whitehouse, the senator from Rhode Island, suddenly talking about suspicious activity reports about the financial transactions of Epstein and everybody he was involved with. Those of you who know my podcast know that I interact with the New York Times. We got the goods on JP Morgan Chase about a month ago, and this is 15 years after all of it happened. Okay. So, first and foremost, it's news to all of the Epstein crack addicts. And I think most of them are, quite frankly, bots of some sort delivered by the DNC that are trying to create all of this sort of upheaval against Trump, but yet at the same time, to what end? Because once the dog catches the car tire, what happens? What's the point? Unless you understand the full scope of exactly what it is that Epstein was involved with and who did what, when, and how, you're never going to get full resolution on the whole thing. Everybody's kind of exploiting it for different this and that algorithms, book deals, this, that, and the other. That doesn't negate that it's a very incredibly important and crucial understanding, as was Watergate at the time, for example. But let me just add to the litany of just what the fuck, right? 9/11. We've never solved 9/11 completely. And I can tell you right now, we knew where the terrorist cells were and we knew who was funding them. So the only question really, Matt, the only question is, how did it happen if we knew how to thwart it? Okay, that's a giant set of questions. The 2008 great financial crisis, we've got all the answers in the con, but we only were able to do half of the con in a 5 hour, television series, which is half of the information I have. The other half is on the shelf. And because I got quashed by the system, we ended up having to create the cleannewdeal.org and this panoply of these truth bomb revs to get your attention. And it is a civil rights like movement. Why I wanted to record with Roseanne right now on Martin Luther King Day, because Roseanne's heart and soul is in it to win it. She is 100% committed. She says over and over and over, she doesn't want the planet to burn. She doesn't want people to needlessly suffer. But yet, when I hear those words, what I'm saying is the greatest opportunity in the history of the world is upon us. But you got to be able to parse and you got to be able to understand who's saying what and why. Okay. There's a lot of people, for example, I just listened to Max from Unfuck the Republic this morning. Smart guy, incredibly good on macroeconomics, sociology, very good on common sense. Every once in a while, he makes some sort of cultural references that I think are worthwhile. And yet, at the same time, he doesn't present a plan. What he says is the Democratic Socialists of America are who you want to provide your money to and not the DNC. Okay. So when I say that to you, Roseanne, when Max from Unfuck the Republic, who is telling us all about the corruption and macroeconomics and everywhere else, but leaving out the $71 trillion truth of how tens of millions of people were set up in a racketeering scheme that was global, that the courts were involved with, that we then illegally gave tens of trillions of dollars to the people that did it. Why might he not mention that? I'm curious.
Being the skeptical person that I've been since I've been a kid, I'm sorry. You're either you either tell the truth, you either say 1 plus 1 equals 2 and not be afraid, or you take the goods, services, the job, whatever it is, from the political party so that you can continue to do what you do. All right. You either have to you either have to say, okay, I'm doing this, I'm I'm doing this on my own. I'm not asking anybody for favors. I'm not selling my soul. I know that both parties want, they want me. They want my spirit. They want my family. They want my votes. So that, see, and it doesn't even make any difference which party you give it to because they're both the same. When you believe that one party is better than the other and that one party wants to do good and serve the people, you got it wrong. You have it wrong. You either have to be out there on your own with, hopefully, like we found each other and you found all the people who were willing to act in service to the truth. They were willing to do it. They lost
Okay,
their jobs.
hold on a second. This is,
Go ahead.
and I love it, but we're now, see, we got to make these points, in my opinion, because what people get lost in the weeds, okay? So, first and foremost, my point about Max and Unfuck the Republic is this, okay? My theory is that Max wants a communist revolution of some sort, okay? What he wants is central power, central control to take care of the bad guys that are completely corrupt.
And that's what you believe. I believe that people who watch him, except for a very small group, his audience, whatever his audience is, yeah, they want a communist revolution.
Okay,
That's
but let me finish this because I didn't get to finish. I didn't get this out of my mouth because the thing is, communism is central control. Okay, and everybody's going to be equal. They're going to be told what to do. They're going to, determine the production, the distribution, everybody's job. Everybody's going to be told what to do. There's no dynamism. I think that guys like Max, and this is just think. This is think. I don't know Max from shit from Shinola. I just know what he says, and he's brilliant, and he knows the macroeconomics, but he leaves the most powerful, most important point out. And I keep thinking to myself, why might that be? Well, because if they reveal that we've got a fiat currency, that we can budget anything that we want or have or need, that then there's some sort of confluence because I looked at this in the MMT world, right? Where Stephanie Kelton continues to say, all you have to do is get 535 members of Congress on the same page. But you and I both know they're both on this, they're all on the same page. That of their benefactors who pay for their
Yeah.
campaigns, who spend the lowest amount of money on the Chuck Schumers of the world, on whomever else, the entirety of the Republican Party, who basically went batshit crazy because they wanted to hire the dumbest, stupidest, most immoral, disgusting goons to basically capture the zeitgeist of all the other buffoons out there and galvanize them into a voting republic, which they did extremely effectively, and insert them into Congress to be able to work on a 24-hour cycle of flood the zone and stupidity. But none of those people have any mission or intent or anything to serve the American people, nor do they understand what it means to be in Congress, except for the senior leaders that control everything, right? That's how these genius architects of Project 2025 have pulled it off. Not only had they pulled it off there, but as you mentioned at the beginning, they pulled it off at the Supreme Court. So I'm just making the point, just using because I happened to see Max this morning, but there's many others. When they get to the point in the conversation where it's like all of these horrible things are happening, and it goes over and over and over. They could spend hours and hours and hours telling you all of the horrible things that are happening from Doge and the billionaire class and invasions and illegal behavior and all of these other things and ICE, and it's just a tidal wave of insanity, right? And they are incredibly good at deconstructing and disseminating what the problems are, but they are not offering solutions that are accountable solutions, which is what we are, and why I'm appealing to all that are systems people and people in business, and quite frankly, sports people, and anybody who's competitive, to understand that we're in the fight for our lives, just like our forefathers, just like the predecessors in the United States that had to go through the American Revolution and the Civil War and World War II and the Civil Rights Movement. It was activism fighting for the fundamentals of the principles of separation of powers, the Bill of Rights, and the Constitution in purpose of liberty and justice for all. Now, we had this myth that we're both a democracy, which is everybody has a choice, and that we're capitalist, which quite frankly, everybody has a choice if you want to know the truth. Both of them are a myth. We show you that in in the Clean New Deal. We are not a democracy. We are not a capitalist system. We are a corporate fascist system undergirded by a criminal syndicate that is backstopped by the full faith and credit of the United States that literally uses socialism for criminals to guarantee the mafiocracy that is now fueling fascism. Okay? Follow the bouncing ball. It's that simple. There is no other story. Why is that possible? Because they destroyed the law. How did they destroy the law? By really smart attorneys in legislatures that write duplicitous sort of laws that can do all sorts of perverted things that you don't understand the slippery slope of legalese or how to fight out of it. That's one of the biggest problems that we have is we've made the legal system so contextually sophisticated and complicated that, like the woman in season 2 trailer of The Con, who was the attorney from Las Vegas, says, you make it so complicated that nobody knows what the fuck you did and you win. Okay. It's a giant labyrinth, right? But like Roseanne said, 1 + 1 = 2. Do you want accountability? I'm sure most of you say yes. Do you want fairness? I would imagine most of you say yes. Do you want equality? I would imagine most of you say yes. Do you want sustainability? Most of you would say yes. On top of that, most of you would like to say that we need fundamental aspects of your existence, be it affordability, for a home or for groceries or for transportation or this, that, and the other, to be able to align more with what your income is, right? Most people would like that. But what's happened in this system, and this is the capitalist system under the neoliberal banner of the course of the last 5 decades, if they found a global paradigm to be able to squeeze and squeeze and squeeze and squeeze profit margins based on supply chains, based on technology, based on everybody not getting the amount of money in the system to be able to sustain a middle class system. Would you agree with any of that? Or with all of that, I should
Of
say.
course.
Okay. So that's reality, is it not?
That's reality.
So
And most people like Max, all right, they just want to, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe this is too simplistic, but there are too many people who just want to say, we need a communist Marxist revolution without giving detail. Or they say, it's the DNC and they will save us. And we know that's not true. So, too many people, like there's a network that's saying, come on, help us to get to 6 million subscribers. Okay, but to what end? Are you telling me how you're going to fix something? No, you're not. And you know damn well, no matter what color, label, party, the one who has the money supposedly always wins. And that's what's been happening. But I am here to tell you that I have seen good people of integrity and courage win with the people power and not the money power.
So
I've
look, it's the
seen it
people.
happen.
It's the money versus the many. But the many are scattered like cats or squirrels, and they don't know which way to turn, and they buy lies. Okay, and they don't have leadership, and they don't know who to listen to. But yet everybody is saying somebody's going to come out of nowhere, and they're going to lead the day. That's who we are. Okay, I have the $71 trillion truth now. I'm going to explain a little bit what that means, and I'm also going to pivot into what the Clean New Deal is and everything that we have to reorient our minds. But I have to talk in terms of systems because we all know that you don't get to fly a 747 unless you're incredibly trained, which means you have to be incredibly competent, which means you have to be someone who is able to pass all sorts of registrations, this, that, and the other, to be competent to get paid to fly that 747. Okay, that's pretty much what all of our institutions require at the highest levels. And we have incredibly capable people in this country. And we are in the middle of lunacyville because most of those types of people are so busy focusing on their disciplines that they missed the game of the billionaire class that has basically shattered the middle class, destroyed ecosystems, destroyed the credibility of the law to hold power to account, to where we repeat the same mistakes in history because, as Mark Twain said, history rhymes. Does it not? Absolute power corrupts absolutely. When a group of men discover plunder, they create a legal code to authorize it, a moral code to glorify it. That came from 17th century France, right before the reign of terror. Okay. What we're going through is not the first time in history it's happened. It is history. So, what side are you going to be on? So, please let me tell you what the $71 trillion truth is first, and then we're going to backpedal into the principles of the Clean New Deal, predicated on the four questions of the Clean New Deal. And all of this is in service to, again, Martin Luther King taught us on this day, however many years ago, I think back to 1964, was his speech at the Lincoln Memorial, where he gave I Have a Dream speech, right? Which was the absolute in, I think, the notion of being a fair republic based on the citizenry believing in equality. Okay. But it wasn't just racial equality, it was also economic equality, which ultimately got him assassinated, in my opinion, in addition to all of the other things that were happening during the Hoover administration, with ultimately RFK and JFK before that. But the $71 trillion truth comes from this. And if you look at the cleannewdeal.org, and I could show you here in a minute, and I don't want to take the time to do it right now, but if you go to Patrick Lovell Presents thecleannewdeal.com or thecleannewdeal.org, and you go to the upper bracket, and on the far right, you're going to see white papers. You scroll down to the first white paper. It's called Federal Reserve Act 13.3. I make the entire case with all the citations, with all the details of how and why this came to be. I'm going to do a quick elevator pitch on this so you understand it, but I would like you to cross reference it so you yourself can suddenly come to the light of what the entire system has prevented you from seeing. First and foremost, in the aftermath of the great financial crisis, which happened in 2008, that a lot of people mistakenly call solely the housing crisis, it was much bigger than a housing crisis because of the tentacles of the too big to fail institutions that tied the entire financial apparatus of the global payment systems and this, that, and the other to this system because we had a whole myriad of deregulation in the late 90s that destroyed what this country learned after the Great Depression, which was to create bulwarks between investment banking and commercial banking. Therein lies the problem. Next, you have to understand that we have the modern executive compensation initiative that creates perverse incentives for CEOs to get insanely rich by enabling their entire apparatus to lie, steal, and cheat to manufacture numbers, first and foremost. How would we prevent that from happening? Don't we have the law, the FBI, the Department of Justice, AGs around the country, smart people, whistleblowers, this, that, and the other to prevent sort of things like that from happening? Yeah, we do. And they all failed. And they all failed 14 years ago, and they all failed in a way that, by the way, manifested both Kamala Harris and Pam Bondi, ironically, to come up through their various channels to basically maintain the status quo that allowed what I'm telling you that if we had stopped this, we would never be in the situation that we're in. What we did was the entire housing bubble was dialed into the entire global economy, and it was all built on lies. Lies, lies, and more lies. We're talking tens of millions of lies. The largest racketeering enterprise in the history of the world, bar none. There's a friend, somebody I like his work. He likes to say that he's discovered the greatest heist in history, which is all things Jeffrey Epstein and Donald Trump and the Russians. It's that much of what I'm telling you. It's important. It's a very important piece of it. But in contextually, what I'm telling you is monumentally bigger than Epstein. Compare the Earth to the size of the largest sun in the universe, or star in the universe. That's how big the differentiation is, okay? And we laid out all of the answers. But what happened was, in the aftermath of the great financial crisis, Congress circled the wagons and created a deception engineering of their own right and created the focus of the media so that everybody thought that Congress was going to solve the problem because Congress has the power of the purse. Congress came together and they approved against everybody at that time was like, you can't bail out Wall Street. But they did, supposedly, to the tune of $700 billion. That was a drop in the bucket that was happening behind the scenes at the Federal Reserve illegally that provided ultimately $71 trillion in liquidity. It started in 2009 with $33 trillion in liquidity. I cite the Levy study. Randall Reyes, the guy whose incredible work, I believe, manifested from an impetus of Bernie Sanders initially, but they got the details of what and how we did to maintain this entire liquidity for this racketeering system. Then between 2012 and 2016-ish and maybe into 2018, we had quantitative easing. Quantitative easing is low interest rates to basically enable to buy for longer periods of time and different adjustments at the overnight window and all of these other sorts of plumbing mechanisms at the Federal Reserve that then ultimately provided an additional $16 trillion of liquidity, and they purchased the so-called toxic asset off the books of the banks, and they just transferred it to the actual Federal Reserve first and foremost, okay? So that was just basically incentivizing the largest racketeering criminal conspiracy in the history of the world because no one went to jail. Who did that? Barack Obama and Eric Holder. That was their administration. They did that completely initially, and that fostered in my opinion, the opportunity for the criminals of the world to work together, between all of the white supremacist groups that were backed by the billionaire apparatus, like the Koch brothers, who started off with the John Birch Society to create Americans for Prosperity, that got into the Heritage Foundation, with the whole constellation of billionaires to ultimately buy the Supreme Court and do these things that they did from the Powell memo forward. But also, it enabled the opportunity for the grifters and the ultimate thugs from Russia behind Putin and many others to be in this apparatus where they galvanize to be able to upswell Donald Trump into a position to absolutely hijack and destroy the United States, because they learned at that point, wait a second, you don't have a law that actually has accountability. Oh, thank you for the freaking, for the writing on the wall. J6 followed, everything followed from there. And then, of course, they ended up with all of these pardons and all of these things that Project 2025 came from. It's a direct correlation. We spent $71 trillion. I didn't finish with this piece of the puzzle. We gave $19 trillion in liquidity, again, using Federal Reserve Act 13.3 illegally because of the way it works in the statutes, which is laid out in the precepts, in the white paper of the Clean New Deal. And I'm really addressing journalists for the most part. But that's $71 trillion before COVID. By the way, it continued during COVID and it continued into the Biden administration. Many might remember after Sam Bankman-Fried collapse, there was a run on these smaller banks because of interest rate swaps, but a lot of it was tied into crypto, but it was also tied into all of the mega tech bros at Silicon Valley Bank. We bailed them out during the Biden administration when Biden lied to us right through his teeth saying these aren't bailouts. They were absolute bailouts. What we've done time and time again is we've provided tens of trillions of dollars to criminals. So turning the question to you, Roseanne, can you have a system of laws and integrity if you give trillions of dollars to the criminals like they're crack addicts?
Of course not, because all they want is more. And I will tell you, as you were saying that, we've bailed out the banks. People who lost their homes, they know that. Yet, when you tell people who have been decimated, thrown out of their homes, when you tell them and show them what's happened and all the money that we've given to this billionaire apparatus, and you say, well, why don't you take your money? Here, just a simple thing. Why don't you take your money out of Bank of America and put it in a credit union? And they'll say, oh no, I got my money in Bank of America. It's too easy. I'm just going to keep it there. Now, they are actually serving the people who screwed them.
That's right. And there's more to that too, because there's more to that too. How many times did we address people who went through this, who had these organizations around the country, who did nothing with the con? We gave them the entire all of them. They all had their micro sort of things with their micro leaders, and they had their lawsuits, and they were trying to do this, that, and the other in the courts that were completely corrupt, and they had all of the evidence in the con, and they never took that forward to be able to present the case in a unified way. They were all like, me, 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 me. Somebody save me. Somebody give me mine. You know what? Yeah, thank you for the information, but I'm going to ignore it because I know better. Like your case about, Bank of America and so on and so forth. People buy into the system because they're like, you know what, it happened to me, but that's the easiest way to deal with this. I'm not going to change anything. Or maybe it didn't happen to me and I'm making money from this, so fuck them. I mean, that's another side of the story too, right? But look, the long and the short of it is, to all of you people out there that are lost in the weeds and lost in translation, who are looking for a way forward, money is all that matters. Okay. It is the core tumor of everything. It is control. It is organization. It's how things get done. It's how Project 2025 outlasted the civil rights movement, because they pay people to think through situations, to understand every technocratic angle to be able to benefit their control. I always found it pathetic and interesting and ironic and hilarious at the same time that libertarian billionaires are always about no government, laissez-faire, keep them out of my thing. Why? Because they want all the control. because they want to control the government. That's what they did. That's what Fred Koch learned by working for none other than Stalin when he built the infrastructure for the Soviet Union's oil empire, where he made all of his money and then imported and exported all of the Politburo manufacturing consent and all sorts of inside control and psychology and everything else, but for white supremacy. Okay? It doesn't matter what ism it is, okay? It doesn't matter. When you have central control, you have some sort of tyranny. Doesn't matter if it's fascism, doesn't have it as a Politburo, doesn't have it, it's Mao. It's all the same central authority. The only thing that enables dynamism is liberty and justice predicated on the legality of the law. So what they did, meaning the libertarian hostile takeover, was they decimated the law. Why did they decimate the law? Because they saw Wall Street decimate the law and get paid tens of trillions to do this. Now, this should make your head explode at this stage of the game. This should make you go, what the fuck? How is this possible? How do I not know this information? Well, because they're really good at hiding this information. You might say they built the entire system to make sure you didn't understand this information. And I will tell you, it's not just white supremacist libertarian billionaires. It's the entirety of our financial system, most notably BlackRock and Blackstone. And interestingly enough, both of those guys are Jewish, if you want to know the truth. Larry Fink and Stephen Schwartzman is unapologetic Trump supporter. Trump supporter has led this incredible campaign of both anti-Semitism and white supremacy, while at the same time being pro-Israel and anti-Semitism. How is that possible? The money, because they're all playing for the same team at that level. Who was Larry Ellison? Who, it makes me sick as a Jewish person to think, oh, wait a second, back in the day, Nazis would say something to the akin of, oh yeah, the Jews own media and the banking infrastructure and they control the world. Meanwhile, I'm looking at the likes of Jeff Zuckerberg and Larry Ellison and a few more, and Larry Fink and Stephen Schwarzman, all of which are incredibly capable and incredibly accomplished, uh, huge billionaires that are Jewish. And what are they doing? Exactly what this freaking facade said. And this on top of Netanyahu using the likes of Palantir to be able to, we could discuss the history of Gaza. We could discuss the history of Israel. We could discuss who paid what, when, and how. And by the way, the whole friend of my enemy thing. When you look at Donald Trump, he's in bed with UAE. He's in bed with Qatar. Who's funding Hamas? Those guys. So he's like they're playing everybody. Okay, because he's a criminal. And this criminal syndicate, what I'm trying to say to you is all of this other stuff, it doesn't matter if it's an ism, it doesn't matter what gender, religion, what race, what anything you belong to, everybody's capable of being a liar. And all the rest of us have to be more committed to truth and justice and liberty than they are to theft, deception, and control and evil, quite frankly. Like Roseanne said, it's a question of good versus evil. It's just simple as that. So they stole $71 trillion. So those of you who want Medicare for all, those of you who want to get rid of systemic policing, those of you who want systemic racism in prisons, those of you who have a renewable energy paradigm, those are all on the table right now. Those are all, we can have groups of people within the Clean New Deal working out, once we take power in Congress, how to work out the details. And the starting point is $71 trillion that went to the guys that destroyed the world. We have to recreate the law. We have to restore the law. We have to take the bad guys down and take them to prison. And we got to take back all of their ill-gotten gains. And we've got to restore the law. Period. Okay. So what does that mean in context to if you've got the revelation of how they got away with $71 trillion illegally that the whole system was in on? Most importantly, media. Media covered this whole thing up. They're all liars. We know right now that there are media, for example, in mainstream media like the New York Times telling us in 2025 how suddenly that JP Morgan Chase was involved with Epstein to what ends forensically. And this is 2025. This was 2004, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, all the way up to 16. And then he hung himself or was murdered in prison in 2019. Nobody was asking questions then. So if they weren't asking questions about something that was that small in comparison to what I'm telling you, you're looking at the tip of the iceberg and, of course, the whole thing underneath it. So before I move on to the next thing, let me ask you this question in terms of where you're coming from. What are you hearing from me at this stage of the game, Roseanne?
Patrick, you have spent years with all the details, and the details to me are common sense facts. I've seen people that you've brought together. I see where it is placed on a website. All people have to do is go there. But people don't want to move from where they're at. They are so happy being their big person, their big cheese in what they are. Oh, we have 3 million subscribers. We don't have 3 million subscribers. We don't have 1 million subscribers. Yet we can show people good from evil. So why can't people look to all the material that we have? There's no shortcut.
Because they're not
It's,
compelled, and we're trying to compel them. So,
I,
was there anything that I said that I know you agree with it, but is there anything you want to add to it?
what I want to add is they really need to focus. They really need to take time. I don't know how more to tell them other than look, spend 10 minutes a day looking at what is given.
Okay, let's help them
Look
focus
at
right now. So, right now, we had a shooting that we're all dealing with in Minneapolis that brings up the biggest question that we put as number one in our four questions. It's called qualified immunity. Why do people want to understand why that is relevant to what we play in the Clean New Deal?
police need to be held accountable for their actions. They cannot simply kill and break into houses and do whatever
That would be a
because they're the
paramilitary.
law.
There would be a paramilitary junta or a fascist state, which is what they're doing right now in front of our eyes. Okay. They're doing it mostly in the name of getting rid of illegal aliens, but they're getting regular citizens and they're shooting everybody, including white people, especially that are protesters. The point of our four questions is to make you understand the lies that have contextualized, which you have to uncover in your mind, which I did, and what led me on this sort of Rubik's Cube full story to be able to set the table for the precepts of the Clean New Deal. This is why we have solutions, and they're not hyperbole and they're not platitudes. They're not what Bernie Sanders is going to tell you, who's going to say the country needs to be about more than billionaires, and we're going to create affordability, by having co-op grocery stores. That's great. We're going to have rent control. That's great. We're going to have childcare. That's fabulous. We're going to have rent. Did I say rent control? There might be something else that I'm missing in there. Through the
Transportation.
yeah, through the Zoran Mondani candidacy and everything else. But it sounds a little different, doesn't it, when they talk about, let's say greedy billionaires versus the billionaire apparatus stole $71 trillion illegally. Okay, that's what's created the affordability crisis, especially if you understand the con. But we'll get back to that in a minute. So the first question is qualified immunity. The reason we have qualified immunity is that states and counties, and I believe cities and so forth, had worked out deals to where back in the 70s, 80s, 90s, there were lawsuits that were like nearly bankrupting all of those different, organ governments. Let's put it that way. And they made out this situation where they were going to take the murder convictions out of the courts into a different arena where settlements could take place so that it wouldn't bankrupt the city, quite frankly.
Yeah, let the law work for them. Let the law
Right.
work
And
for the
nobody knew how
city.
to stop it. It's like an insurance deal and yada, yada, yada. And all of the guys who were inside, all of the different, local governments agreed to it because they were like, I guess, I can't think for them, and nor am I God, but I would just imagine they were thinking of a practical sort of thing where it's like, yeah, we got to have police. They got to be able to shoot bad guys. And at the same time, some, innocent people might be killed, but we don't want to bankrupt the city. So this might be a middle ground. What they ended up doing and what they ended up fostering for let's say Stephen Millers of the world, even though he didn't know this stuff, because that guy's about as big of a bloviating idiot as it comes. But the people behind him and the technocrats were like, whoa, wait a second. We could build a military Gestapo-like force, based on what we already have, give them a budget north of what the Marines get, and then give them what? Qualified immunity? Okay, that's a fascist state. Okay, America, millions of you know that is what's happening right now. So the first question is, what is qualified immunity? The second question is, what is judicial immunity? Now, we could talk about appellate courts and some other things, and I do want to point out that recently a lot of people have been saying, including my colleague, we got to be able to, give the good news when it comes. And we deal with the new untouchables, and they're all about the legal remedies to all of these things by lawsuiting the shit out of this administration by all means necessary. And in a lot of cases, it is true in appellate courts, particularly, that judges that have lifelong sentences that are above the law can immure to judging in a way where they're immune from the pressures of the Trump administration. However, conversely, we have a Supreme Court that has gotten over $1 billion in backdoor support that has bought off Clarence Thomas, Judge Alito, Roberts, Kavanaugh, Colbert, Colbert, what is her name? Amy, anyway, her name will come to,
Conan Barrett.
there you go. That's it. Exactly. And then, of course, who am I missing? Judge Roberts, I said. Anyway, I think I'm missing one in there. But of the six of the nine justices, right, that have been basically shoved down America's throat because of Mitch McConnell and all of these billionaire apparatuses that have worked the back door, including, Leo Leonard and a couple of these others and these really organized structures that have decimated the Supreme Court's ability to rule without fear or favor on behalf of the American people in our history. They've etch a sketched the United States, and they've created the third question, the executive presidency, which can put the dumbest human being, six-time deferred, bone spur coward from military service who went bankrupt six or seven, was about to go bankrupt seven times. I think it was five-time bone deferment. But anyway, the most pathetic individual in the history of the world as the most powerful idiot in the history of the world. I don't think there's ever been a more gloriously fucked up situation that I've ever seen in my life. A lot of people want to compare Hitler to Trump. Trump is no Hitler. Trump, Trump doesn't have an original idea in his whole body. He's a transactional pig. He didn't create any of this. He just happened to be able to slip through the frickin' pieces because the law never held him account. So through those first three questions,
And he had mobsters helping him.
right, it's the mob
Money.
president. And now everybody is recognizing that it's the RICO presidency. And oh, by the way, I've become an expert in RICO as a result of all of this work that I've done in the con, which reveals the largest racketeering in the history of the world. And oh, yeah, I will just add in that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is no expert in RICO. I'll just put it at that. But what's the commonality, Roseanne, in terms of the first three questions?
Law.
There you go. You've been 100%. You got an A plus on this whole freaking thing so far. The law, the law has been destroyed. And I can't believe that people don't realize that the law is the only thing that makes the United States the United States. Is it not?
Absolutely.
What's the United States without the Bill
What's
of
the
Rights and the Constitution?
Constitution? What's
Exactly.
the bill? Come on.
And these guys, through executive orders, through Doge, through this, that, and the other, through the technocracy of Project 2025, have hijacked the government, just like, by the way, all of the mergers and acquisitions of corporate America in the 80s and the early 90s. It's the exact same thing. That's what they did. They corporatized the United States. And what did I say earlier? We're not a democracy. We're a corporate fascist state that's controlled by a inverted totalitarianism that's ultimately, dependent on the full faith and credit of the United States that guarantees the mob that created the fascism. It's that simple, following the bouncing ball. So the first three precepts is the law. So we have to restore the law. But the fourth one is the methodology of the voting myth. Okay. We're supposedly a constitutional republic. You have different states have different, electoral electors as a result of population, but they're supposed to vote with the general population based on their vote, and they're supposed to vote with the will of the people. And then therefore we have swing states, and there's all sorts of other technocratic sort of scenarios that can be gamed by this system of people that are relentless at gerrymandering and lying. In the 2020 election, we know, and this was one of the cases that was down in Fulton County, Georgia, with Fonnie Willis before she blew it up because she had an affair. She made herself vulnerable, which was one of the dumbest things in history. I'll say that for the record. And push out all of you who want to push back on it. Oh, it's because she's a woman. No, she's a woman who made a stupid decision. You got to hold everybody to account equally if you want equality, okay? But the bottom line is they were looking at the racketeering in Georgia using fake elector slates that used what Don the Con, Rico Pedo Pig always talks about, documentation fabrication, as he does his ultimate formula: lie, deny, switch the blame, and implicate, right? That's what he does. And that's what he's saying all the Democrats have done to him. Some have, some haven't, but he has been lying on documentation records and falsifying records his entire freaking career, to the point that we saw it come undone in Letitia James' case. That a lot of you were like, oh my God, Letitia James is a hero. Yeah, she was good to a certain extent. But let me ask you this, Roseanne, because I know you know the answer. Did Letitia James fully understand what she was actually prosecuting?
She missed the banking, she missed Deutsche Bank, she missed the
She missed the control fraud. She missed the whole point.
overall.
She missed the whole point. But the thing is, I'm curious if she actually missed it or just chose not to prosecute it. See, I don't know. It's New York after all. And yeah, they've been doing it forever. And if you unglue one, you have to unglue the other. And that's what we're trying to tell you people, is that it's control fraud. And I wish I could turn you on to the con right now so you could go explore what that's all about. But we'll save that conversation for another day. Bottom line is that the bank, Deutsche Bank, was involved. They weren't the victims of Donald Trump pulling one over on them. They were working together, and they were also working with Putin. That's a whole nother side of this. And they couldn't get that. Neither could Merrick Garland get any of this stuff. And most of you know it. And so why would you vote for Democrats now? Why would you give money to the DNC? What have the DNC done for the American people but enabled Trump? Am I wrong about that statement?
Look, I knew that decades ago. You don't have to convince me.
Of
That's the problem. Nobody wants, Patrick, it's time, it's effort. Nobody wants to take the time. Okay, look,
See, the electoral college. The electoral college enables manipulation for the minority to rule the majority using all sorts of illegal behavior that has not been held accountable, but also that just does certain things like enables small states like what Wyoming with an exuberant amount of billionaires to have more legislative influence than big states like California with 50 million people. So that's a perversion of power, okay? That's just of, by, and for tyranny. That's what that is. Okay. So the precepts of the Clean New Deal, I'm going to ask you to nail these one at a time, and I'm just going to ask you one at a time. So I'll take you through. What is the first precept of the Clean New Deal, Roseanne?
we have to create a new Glass-Steagall Act to separate investment banking from commercial banking, because we cannot allow using other people's money to, it's illegal. It's
And
not
allow people to
right.
use unlimited other people's money and backstop by the full faith and credit of the United States when it's already in the statutes that it's illegal to do so. Okay. You got to have Congress, here's the biggest thing. Congress is supposedly the power of the purse. What we really have is the Federal Reserve is the power for the purse for the financial system. Okay. Nobody passed that law. Nobody ever knew that's what was going on. And yet that's what we've been doing the whole
But
time.
they took a law. They took Federal Reserve Act 13(3). They had to have a law. And what do? They use it illegally. So they're telling people, well, people don't even know this. When Hank Paulson and Barack Obama, when oh, they saved the world. They saved the economy.
They
Bullshit.
saved the billionaire class that gave us Trump and all the criminals. That's what this is all about. Okay. So what we're proposing is you got to create a new Glass-Steagall Act, and it's new because we had it after the Great Depression, because we learned all these lessons after the Great Depression. They just broke them all up in the deregulation era of the Clinton administration. Though it was about the same time that Epstein was rolling down. And you can't blame just one person, it's the whole system. Okay. But ultimately, what they did is they're a bunch of technocrats, very smart people that came out of the best legal law firms in the country, that came out of the best Ivy League educations, and they know how to lie, steal, and cheat better than anybody. That's what they did. They run circles around you because you don't know how the system works.
And
So
make it so complicated, you say, I don't understand that. They're the smart ones. Let them do what they're going
most
to
of
do.
you would have checked out by now, but thank God those of you who are still here, you're the ones we're looking for, because you're the ones who understand how business operates, how the law operates, how you're supposed to be, how you're supposed to create and foster dynamism and liberty and justice for all. And what we're telling you is the only way we can do that. So to finish it up, though, we have to have a caveat with the new Glass-Steagall that from this point forward, henceforth, that we shall never allow the full faith and credit of the United States with the exigent lending superiority and aspect of the Federal Reserve to provide liquidity to racketeering institutions. First of all, nobody in the fucking history of the world would vote for that publicly if everybody knew what that was going on. But because nobody knows what's going on, they all kind of went nod and wink, and we got to do what we got to do to save ourselves. That's what they did. They saved themselves and they destroyed everybody else. The flip side of that is the second precept, which Bernie and AOC always say we have to do, and we're in agreement. What is the second precept?
Get rid of Citizens United.
Okay,
Okay.
understood. Now, the third precept of the Clean New Deal, I believe, is the most important. I'm going to ask my colleague Roseanne Rabiola Mile to lay it out. What is it?
We can show you how $71 trillion can be used for the benefit of we, the people. And I'll put in there the planet because look, because we are monetarily sovereign and the Congress can choose what to spend on, they need to spend it on all the things that we, the people, benefit from. They need to spend it on renewable energy and a new grid and affordable housing and education and prison reform and Medicare for all. And it's not a question of money. It's a question of where is that money going to be put to use? It needs to be put to use for the public. And turning this into a country that has liberty, justice, fairness for everybody, not just for a few people.
I think you're absolutely right with that assessment. I want to just add a couple of thoughts here. It's not socialism, okay? We already have socialism as we've already laid out exhaustively. We have socialism for criminal billionaires that are destroying the world and destroying democracy. Now, a lot of you that are macroeconomists and others that fancy yourself economists because you loosely have heard a few terms here and there, yes, inflation can be a problem. The easiest way to mitigate inflation is with productive capacity to rebuild what we have to rebuild, not to constrict, not to go back to the 50s, not to create a paradigm of corruption and collusion between enemies that have destroyed so many of us over the course of the last at least 25 years, using an antiquated fossil fuel source that will poison the world. We had the science, back in the 70s. This is all the idiots who literally do not understand that climate change will destroy everyone. It's in the process of it. It's not going to destroy everyone. It's going to destroy a vast majority of us. And it's going to lead to some sci-fi bullshit, weird, whatever the fuck, with all of these guys living in bunkers and everybody basically being their slaves, whatever.
Yeah, right.
that's kind of the future, really. I mean, the unwritten future that seems pretty, James Cameron-esque, if you ask me. All things Avatar, going back to Arnold Schwarzenegger and the Terminator. But the magnitude of the money that we're talking about, just to put it into perspective, $71 trillion dollars there's 1,000 billion in a trillion. Our GDP is roughly 25 trillion to 27 trillion. We're still the largest GDP in the world. I believe China is getting closer, but the long and the short of it is that that's for the sum total of every person in the United States working, that's not under the age of 18 or child or whatever the categories are. We're talking, I think, north of 300 million people probably. Okay. What we're talking about in terms of the $71 trillion, dollars, it went to literally, I'm going to say on the high side, roughly 300,000 people to manage, mostly for the top 0.001% of them that are the billionaires of the world, right? The Jeff Bezos, the Mark Zuckerbergs. I said Jeff Zuckerberg earlier. I apologize. Mark Zuckerberg, of course, Elon Musk, and the idiocracy that is, and Peter Thiel, and all of these, state-sponsored terrorism through technology, and all of these things that are leading to authoritarianism that is destroying us. We've been saying it's going to destroy us. That corruption fuels fascism for now years. And there's people I hear on these videos that are in Minneapolis going, how did this happen to us? This isn't the United States. Where have you been? Now, I'm so glad you're in the streets protesting, and I think you've got courage, and that's a testimony to your character. But you got to think about the paradigm here, people, because if you don't know what the black box of truth is that this system operates to the tune of, there's no way in hell you can defeat it. Okay. And again, that's why we're talking to people most likely that have a college education, that are in business, that know things, that don't want to leave the world to the grandchildren of, dying, don't want to be activated for like our forefathers against King George III, or Abraham Lincoln against slavery, or FDR in the United States against fascism, and of course, Martin Luther King against Jim Crow, right? That's who we are in this whole process. And yeah, do we have to do it peacefully? That's the only way we're going to win. And of course, if a lot of people in the military get the message that they're going to screw you and they are screwing you, and you're not going to lift up your guns for it, there's got to be, I think, a fracture in the military to say, you've gone a step too far, fascist regime. And there's got to be leadership from the likes of, and I'm going off on a tangent, but Tim Walz last week uttered, I'm going to issue a warning order to activate the National Guard. Has he done that, Roseanne?
Not that I know of.
So Tim Walz is FOS, okay? He is a coward, just like all of the other DNC cowards. He should have, and same with every Democratic governor, should have unleashed their sheriffs to go arrest ICE for bringing.
Pritzker.
We saw this guy murder this woman, and we saw all the different camera angles. Now, yeah, it's got to go through the courts and this and that, and of course, that's the frustrating part because the law just goes so goddamn slow. And like Martin Luther King said, of course, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. Yeah, okay, we don't have any time. One person at a time, every day at a time. But there is no time, and the time is now. It's a paradox. Everything we're telling you is what can turn the tables on this insanity if you become a true believer and you become a nuclear reaction vector to everything we're talking about. So to finish up with
Precept 4 is we gotta.
No, hold on.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. The $71 trillion truth in socialism. Okay. Listen, people, we've got to restore the middle class. That's the biggest problem. We've had 7 decades roughly of marching forward with neoliberalism and a globalistic sort of paradigm that the architects from the big law firms that run Congress have created that have exploited the entire world for the financial class, which is basically the top 1%, which is ultimately the top 10%. But they destroyed liberty and justice for all in the United States as they were doing it. Okay. You talk to somebody who writes for the New York Times, where they get in the paradox is you can't stop globalism. But here's what I hear all the time. Do you not hear this as well, Roseanne? The Clean New Deal is global. Is the Clean New Deal not global? For everyone who
Absolutely,
believes
it's
in
global.
democracy and liberty and justice for all. But the United States is being pretty much the paragon of what was the greatest democracy in history, even though we've always had flaws. And we're always going to have flaws, people. Don't ever think it's ever going to be perfect. It's not. But there's okay and there's really good versus this is insane. Okay. And we're in the insane stuff. So again, $71 trillion is the starting point. We have a fiat currency. We have productive capacity. We have geniuses that know how to operate this stuff. They're just not in control and they don't run Congress. Everybody who's running for Congress, we want you to lift up the Clean New Deal. We want to create a whole constellation of people that are just hearing us for the first time going, oh my God, they've got the answers, the evidence, everything I'm looking for, because we're what everybody is looking for. Everybody else is lying to you. We're not trying to sell you communism. But I will say this, if you want to be socialist, go ahead. Go build a microbrewery in Washington, which a lot of them exist, where they all have co-ops. You can be socialist. Nobody's stopping you from being socialist. And for those of you who are like, okay, well, no, this is all about Marx and volume three, and we've got to get on with the revolution that never actually happened. To what end? You're going to tell people who want to learn how to play guitar that they can't become guitar players because they got to go work out in the factories? Come on, man. You got to have freedom. You got to have liberty. You got to have people pick and choose their whole way through this whole thing. That's what it's all about. But that's not to say that you don't have a social safety net that can guarantee Medicare for all, that can create a renewable energy infrastructure, that can get rid of systemic violence and fascism in our.
It's not about the money.
It's about the will of the people, and we're giving you a construction and a flexibility and a dynamism to get it. We would have never gotten to the moon without NASA. NASA would have never gotten to the moon without the government of the United States. There's a way systems work and the way they function well. And when they work together for a collective objective, amazing things can happen. Okay. But at the same time, you can also celebrate freedom and independence at the same time. You can be both things at the same time. So, what's the fourth precept through the eighth precept?
Number four is we have to expand the Supreme Court to 13 justices. There must be a canon of ethics that they not only have to abide by, but when they don't, they're out.
They have
They're
to be arrested. They
prosecuted.
have to be thrown in
That-
jail.
That's right. They have to be prosecuted.
Talking about the
Okay.
Supreme Court. We're talking about, guys, the Supreme Court cannot be above the law. Go ahead.
Right. Okay. Uh, number five, we have to stop with the presidential immunity,
No
the
kings.
no creek, absolutely. The presidential immunity, the judicial immunity, the qualified immunity, all those things, and all of that has to do with the law.
Which is
Nobody
corrupted.
is above the law.
It
And
means fascism. When the law gets corrupted, you have fascism and authoritarianism. Guys, it's step and repeat, paint by the numbers. This is what we've seen, not just since we invented the word fascism during Mussolini. This goes back 1,000 years through tyranny, through all, governments. I mean, it's just, guys, nothing happens in a vacuum. It's our turn to pick up the mantle through common sense to create a 10 million plus out of the gate uh, civil rights movement to restore liberty and justice for all by restoring the law first and foremost, by creating a chemo for the tumor of corruption. So you nailed those. So the final two precepts.
the
Three
final
precepts.
ones are the final ones are we have to have term limits for all the well, let's do term limits for all the federal officials, but we have to stop any prohibit and prosecute any insider trading for any of the people in Congress and for members of the cabinet, anybody. You don't You
Insider
gotta
trading in
stop the
government. If you're
payoffs.
insider trading in government, if you're Nancy Pelosi that walks with $300 million or however many millions of dollars after being in office for however long she is part of the fucking cancer, guys. And yeah, I know that she's better than Mitch McConnell. Oh yeah, but there's a problem with that. Bernie, you want to end all of this stuff, but you got to play ball. You got to cooperate. Yeah, but they cooperate with the money. That's the whole thing. And Marjorie Taylor Greene is a hero because she doesn't want to stand with MAGA against Epstein because of what? Look, she came in with $700,000. She's walking with 27 million. That's over $6 million or $4 million per year. For what? Who paid her? How'd she get that? This is pure blatant corruption. Guys, anybody who understands system, if it's a corrupt elevator and you're in it and the cable snaps, you die. If you're in a car and you have a corrupt braking system, your brakes don't work, you slam into the car, you die. You get on a plane, you got a corrupt, system with something fails and you're at 40,000 feet in the air, you go down in flames. Okay, this is 2025, people. I've known all this stuff since 1975. What I didn't know were the details of the corruption and the revolving door that leads you to the $71 trillion truth that makes it all possible. So the final piece that Roseanne didn't mention now, but she did earlier, was the electoral college. The electoral college, we got to get rid of that. But there is no time. We got to sell this to each and every one of you, one day at a time, one person at a time. Each one of you needs to see one, teach one. We all have to join unanimity, and we've got to, if you, me, and everyone you see who isn't a Nazi, who believes in liberty and integrity and in decency and beauty, sustainability, if we merge in unity behind the Clean New Deal, it's our destiny to purge the misery of tyranny, to unleash the renaissance of possibility. But only if you become a nuclear reaction vector to the big bang of truth that we're dropping. We're on the anniversary of the 250th anniversary of the American Revolution. There's really only two pathways forward for those of us who are, let's say, past the age of 30. We will never see an election again. We will never see democracy in again. We're living in Putin's Russia. It'll get worse. People will be thrown into concentration camps. They will be disappeared. That is happening right now. But there is more of us than them if we're all on the same page. And we have to emerge, not the old guard, not the vanguard. There is no vanguard. I know millions of you like Bernie. Bernie doesn't have these answers. He sat on this stuff for now 14 years. Elizabeth Warren, she's calling for a populist revolution. Elizabeth Warren has been talking out of both sides of her mouth the whole time. And yeah, she's a good one in context to everything else. They all play games. This is not a game. This is your life. This is your democracy. This is the life of your children, your grandchildren. This is the life of the planet, which my good friend and colleague Roseanne Rabiot always expresses. I just felt it necessary today, on this incredibly important day, Martin Luther King Day, to remind you that we, the people, have the power if we exercise it effectively. Everybody else out there is lying. Please stop lying, stop buying lies, discover the Clean New Deal at thecleannewdeal.org, or Patrick Lovell presents The Clean New Deal. Final words to you, Roseanne.
I'm going to tell you, you're either going to go for good and just kick the evil away. You're either going to spend the time to do it or you're not. And you can't make a cake or a meal or any kind of dish without a recipe. Okay. All we're giving you is a recipe. That's all.
What happens if they ignore us and they don't get on board?
You're shot. You're toast. You're
You're
gone.
you're pretty much dead, as is the planet. Look,
And I'm gonna tell you, don't tell me, old boomer people, oh, I want to do this for my grandchildren. Honey, that ain't gonna happen if you keep watching Dancing with the Stars and The Price is Right, then you can't do shit, okay? I'm old. I listen, it's hard for me. It gets harder every day to do what I do and try to influence people. But you're either gonna go for the gusto and understand that we can do this. And I'm going to be a winner. Patrick's going to be a winner. You want to be a winner? Come on, baby. Because for me, for Patrick, hey, failure is not an option. End of the story.
Brilliant. And to your point about the old people, Mark Dan said it last Friday that, that seniors are the ultimate target of fraud and predation and deception.
Right.
They're out there to get you. By you not joining forces with us, you just make yourself more vulnerable. People we've had Black Lives Matter, we had Me Too, we had before that Occupy Wall Street, then we had anti-Gaza, this, that, and the other. They're all tied to the same thing, but you can't live in silos. Okay, the corruption and the power in MAGA is the force of the white supremacy behind the technocratic billionaires that unfortunately has many Jews in as well. And shame on you who are Jewish. You should know better because I'm not, your savior or anyone's savior. I'm not trying to be your dictator, right? But I am with the Clean New Deal and Roseanne Rabiola Mille, we're your liberators. This is truly exodus from corruption. You have to make a choice. You sit down and you're going to be living in bondage the rest of your life because that's better. Freedom and liberty and democracy is scary for a lot of people. We're not looking for those people. We're looking for people who know that freedom, liberty, and democracy are the only things that make life flourish, quite frankly. So thank you for listening. All the best on Martin Luther King's Day. God bless the memory of Martin Luther King. And remember, it's not a dream if you do. Thank you. All the best.